All right, welcome to the last video for narrative writing. So you were almost there. In our last session, we talked about how to write an interesting hook or an introduction to your story to make the beginning hook the reader or make the reader want to read more, to make it to get their interest in the story. Today we're going to be talking about writing a good ending to your narrative story. Today I am not going to read a new book since I've read so many narratives during these different lessons. But what I am going to do is I'm going to read different endings from the stories that we have read so you can get a good idea. So a lot of times, third graders or students who are doing writing, when they are finished writing their narrative, it's something like, "Then we went home, the end," or "We were all happy, the end," or "It was so fun, the end." Those are all endings, but they're kind of boring and blah. So what I want you to do is to try to make an interesting ending that relates to the content of your narrative. So let's go back to The Relatives Came, which we just read in the last session. And so you remember the relatives all came to their house, and then the relatives went back home to Virginia. So this is how this one ends. "And when they were finally home in Virginia, they crawled into their silent, soft beds and dreamed about next summer." So I really like, I really like this ending because we kind of have the whole journey of them traveling to see their relatives. Then they went back home to their own house, and I like how it says about how they dreamed about the next summer. I think that's just a nice ending because it kind of concludes the whole narrative, and it leaves a little hope of what might happen for the next summer. Maybe their relatives will come visit them in Virginia and eat up all their grapes like they had talked about. If we go back to A Chair for My Mother, I'm actually going to read the whole last page for you. I'll show you the picture too. "We set the chair right beside the window with the red and white curtains. Grandma and Mama and I all sat in it while Aunt Ida took our picture. Now Grandma sits in it and talks with people going by in the daytime. Mama sits down and watches the news on TV when she comes home from her job. After supper, I sit with her, and she can reach right up and turn out the light if I fall asleep in her lap." So I like this ending because it kind of talks about how they're using the chair now, and it's a really good conclusion to the narrative. The whole narrative was about how they got the chair, why they bought this chair, and then it shows how they're using the chair. Her mama uses it to watch the news. Grandma sits in it during the day and talks to people going by. And the narrator of the story, the little girl, sits in her mom's lap and usually falls asleep. Finally, we're going to look on Come On Rain. And here's how this one ends. "We sure did get a soaking, Mama, I say, and we head home, purely soothed, fresh as dew, turning toward the first sweet rays of the sun." So we know in this whole narrative, the whole story was about them all wishing for rain, and then the rain finally came, and they all danced in the rain. And what I like about this ending is that the sun's rays are coming up, so we know that the rainstorm has ended. So the sun's coming back up, and they all feel purely soothed, fresh as dew. I like that because you can kind of get this image in your head of how they were washed by the rain and refreshed by that rain. So I read all of these endings again for you because I wanted you to hear what good authors do when they end stories. They don't end, "It was the best summer ever, the end," or "I was so glad it rained, the end," or "We love the chair, the end." They could have done that, but they have really interesting details again. Details are what are really key in good narratives. They have good details that let us know how they're using, like how she used the chair, how they're dreaming about next summer, or how they felt after that rain. So it's imagery again, like we just talked in the last lesson. Really good imagery that leaves you remembering the narrative really well and kind of having an overall sense of feeling about the story, about the narrative. So in your ending, I want you to think about how you can make a good ending that's interesting and that doesn't end, "We all went home, we all had fun." like one whole blanket statement. I want you to actually think about a really interesting ending that either entices the reader to want to read more of your stories, or leaves them with an overall feeling of why your narrative was so good, or what made it so interesting, or the overall theme of your narrative. All right, so happy writing. I can't wait to see your narratives. After you're finished with writing an ending, I want you to go ahead and write a final draft. You can handwrite it or you can type it. If you're handwriting it, just at least one page handwritten, just a front. If you're typing it, just sorry, Jack's playing the guitar. One typed sheet should be fine, but you can double or triple space it if you'd like. Again, you can illustrate it if you want. You don't have to. Purely optional, but as we've seen in all of our stories, illustrations really can enhance the story and make it more interesting so that we have better pictures in our minds. All right, so happy writing. Please send your narrative to your homeroom teacher. If you have questions, let me or your homeroom teacher know. Happy writing!